our online programs. And for those of you who are listening to the recording later, we're delighted that you're reaching out for more information about our online programs. With us here today are Tess Jacobson. Tess is the Associate Director for the Environmental Program. You'll hear a bit from her later. She is our lead on many questions relating to the MSL and LLM programs. You'll also hear a bit more about one of the areas of study that we offer, international environmental law, from Professor Chris Wold, who is joining us as well. And the final person I want to wave to is our program coordinator, Delia Weidman. Delia is also a great resource if you have questions about the application process or documents or any of the programs. So all of us are happy to answer any questions that you might have, whether those questions are today or if you'd like to make an appointment to have individual questions answered, or you want to shoot us an email. We will provide our contact information, of course, and we're happy to answer any questions that you might have. So with that, I'm just going to give some basic information about our two online degree programs before we get into a little bit more detail about international environmental law and the course that we offer in that area. So I'm sure that most of you know an LLM is a degree for students who already have their law degree, whether that's a JD in the US or an LLB or law equivalent internationally. An LLM is a post-law degree program. And it is designed for lawyers who've been practicing either in other areas and want to make a pivot to environmental law, or for those who already have an environmental practice or experience and really want to raise up the level of expertise in the area. And we accept folks from all walks of life in that journey, whether you're fresh out of your law school experience and want to continue with an LLM, or if you've been out for a few years or many years. We certainly welcome all levels of experience and background. The Master of Studies of Law, which is shorthand the MSL program, that is for folks who do not want to go to law school or necessarily to be a lawyer, but really would find exposure to environmental law and policy helpful in their professional development. So it's a wonderful graduate level program. You are in the same classes as the LLMs and other law students. You are being taught legal concepts, but our MSL students choose to use that education for policy work or education or to work for nonprofits, again, where knowledge of law and policy would be useful. And again, much like the LLM, MSLs are welcome to join the program at various times in your career. You may have a lot of experience or you want to have some exposure as a new area of the law. So Tess, I may have covered stuff on the next couple of slides already, but we'll take a peek here. Okay, great. We're ready to move to the main topic of today. So again, we're delighted to have with us today Professor Chris Wold. Chris is one of our international environmental legal experts. He has been at the top of this field for several decades, and he teaches international environmental law in the online MSL LLM programs. He also teaches ocean and coastal law, again, in our online programs, teaches both of those courses in person here on our Portland campus, as well as other international courses such as trade and the environment. He's a leading scholar in the area, textbook co-author, frequent speaker, and he also founded our International Environmental Law Clinic, which is still going strong. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris to talk, to give you a sense of what these online classes cover, in particular, the international course. So Chris, take it away.
Thank you, Janice, and thank you for that nice introduction. Welcome to everyone. As Janice said, I'm just going to give you an overview of how my international environmental law course is structured, but the basic structure, other than the specific focus on international environmental law, is probably similar across the board, right? So in my course on international environmental law, we'll start with kind of two competing paradigms for how we organize international environmental law and policy. Sustainable development, which for many environmentalists is the more environmentally driven paradigm, and then trade liberalization. We've heard a lot about trade in the first few months of the current president's term. But international trade law is where we find our rules for trade liberalization. And the question becomes, as we see in some of our treaties, can trade law be used to support our environmental goals? And if they are able to do that, do they nonetheless run into conflict with trade law, international trade law? From there, we get to sources of international environmental law. Treaties are not the only source for finding international law. We can also, and I'm not asking for the slide to be moved just yet, but we will also see law in principles, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we do get to the next slide, right? But once we kind of look at these sources of international environmental law, we then move on to some of the more important global environmental treaties. We will see in those treaties how many of these principles of international law are embodied within them, right? Even if the the principles of international law are not somehow binding international law in and of themselves, we may make them so through our environmental treaties. One of the icons here shows climate, ocean, flora, and fauna, and that's indicating that I cover a broad range of treaties. We don't focus only on animals. We will also, or biodiversity. We will also focus on pollution statutes, but also, pollution treaties, as well as the Law of the Sea Convention, which is the major treaty for ocean governance, and it includes rules relating to the environment, but much more than that. And then within each treaty, there will be a number of different themes that we discuss, including what are the policies that are driving the solutions chosen within that particular treaty. Some embrace trade restrictions, like the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. When a species is endangered, we prohibit international trade for primarily commercial purposes. Other treaties don't do that, right? So what are the underlying policies that led to particular treaty provisions to govern that particular area of law, and that whether it's species protection or ocean governance or whatever the issue is. But there will be many other themes that will be discussed within the context of each treaty, most importantly, perhaps, are the differences in points of view between the global north and the global south. As we will discuss, really in all aspects of the course, there are fundamentally different perspectives on how to approach different issues. And that may be because if we're talking about biodiversity, many countries in the global south are the biodiverse rich countries. The global north, typically not very biodiverse. And as a consequence, when we talk about biodiversity conservation, the burden is placed on developing countries, the global south, to protect that biodiversity, right? And if that's going to be the case, what role then does the developed world have to facilitate implementation of the rules that the developed countries want? But how are they going to facilitate implementation by developing countries? And then, of course, how do we ensure enforcement of the treaty rules? Are there compliance mechanisms that we can rely on to get countries to do what they are, that they have agreed to do, right? And are bound in international law to do so. If we can advance the slide. So here's just a short list of some of the principles that we will discuss. Maybe the first two, the precautionary principle and the polluter pays principle, have achieved some widespread recognition in the international community, even outside of the law, right? Or you'll hear those phrases used in newspaper articles and magazine articles. And even if, so I'm looking, neither the precautionary principle, which says countries should mitigate or minimize environmental harm, even when there is scientific uncertainty, right? Even if we don't call that a binding principle of international law, when we get to treaties, we'll see how that principle is embraced by that particular treaty regime. But we'll also see, and we'll hear more about the precautionary principle as well as the polluter pays principle, which is the idea, as the name suggests, that polluting countries should be the ones paying for remediation of that pollution. We'll hear more about those two principles in the context of an advisory opinion being prepared by the International Court of Justice concerning climate change right now. So developing countries went through the United Nations General Assembly asking the International Court of Justice to prepare an advisory opinion to determine what are the obligations of countries to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. The precautionary principle, the polluter pays principle, in addition to many other international treaties, are prominent in the briefings provided by countries to the International Court of Justice. Right. And I won't go into each of these principles, but it gives you a sense that there's a rich body of law outside of treaties, right? And these principles are critical for lawyers arguing on behalf of their clients, whether your client is a non-governmental organization participating in a treaty regime, or you are a lawyer, for example, for the US State Department, and providing a briefing to the International Court of Justice concerning the obligations of states to countries to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. Tess, can you advance the slide? Thank you. Then once we finish our unit on principles, we move to treaties. And by one count, there are something like 900 international environmental law treaties, and we won't obviously have time to cover 900. But what I've done is look at the range of treaties where we have significant participation among all countries of the world, but then also look at, as I mentioned earlier, biodiversity-related treaties and pollution-oriented treaties. And then even within those treaties, I chose treaties where governments have chosen different strategies for protecting species or biodiversity or whales, or in the case of pollution, how are we going to address hazardous waste trade? How are we going to deal with international trade in persistent organic pollutants? So just, I wanted students to get the broad range of strategies that governments have used to address particular international environmental problems. Right. And then you see, and I guess I got ahead of myself with that first slide, but we see some of the unifying themes that we discuss with respect to each of our treaties. One that I didn't mention earlier is the role of non-governmental organizations. So international law, as the name suggests, is law among nations, right? Nonetheless, in most treaties, not all, non-governmental organizations like Greenpeace, like our own Global Law Alliance, are able to participate to the extent that governments allow them to participate. And in most treaties, the role of non-governmental organizations is critical to the effective implementation of the treaty. If I think of the International Convention for the Regulation of Whaling, I'm not speaking out of turn when I say that non-governmental organizations are responsible for almost everything that happens in that treaty body. Turn the slide, Tess. And then just in terms of how the course is kind of structured from your learning experience perspective, right? There will be a number of video recordings. So now probably getting ahead of my closing remarks, but when we first started this online program, I was a bit of a skeptic because I didn't think the learning outcomes would even come close to mirroring what the in-person experience would be like. But I've completely changed my mind about that, which is why I now teach 2 courses in the online program. The recordings are not, you're not just going to see me in front in my office talking to you for a couple of hours, right? There is a lot of post-production that goes in, right? So to say they're high quality recorded lectures is for me a bit of an understatement. I was just totally stunned when I was asked to review the recordings. And you may get a particular kick out of my avatar, my animated avatar, which takes over once in a while. I have universally heard from not only my students, but students who have other professors that the recordings are excellent and engaging, I guess is the better way to describe it. Right? You still may want to go clean your oven or something like that, but when they're playing, but in any event, the people who put, in addition to the actual substantive content, the recordings are actually quite fun. We can't mimic the give and take that we have in the classroom, where I get to ask you questions and you respond, and then maybe your classmates contribute to discussion, but we do it through what we call discussion boards. For each class, so for each unit of the class, I pose 2 questions, 2 the students, and you are asked to provide a written response, and then other students can respond to your post, and you will be asked to respond to a classmate's post. And this has actually been a highlight for me of the online course experience, seeing how students go most students go well beyond the materials to prepare their response. Uh, I'm not suggesting you're required to do that, but students, you can see, really get engaged in the material. And because of the way our courses are structured, they're done so in a way where students want to go do some of their own outside research in order to respond to the questions. And then I also, and most of my colleagues also have quizzes that you are required, that are graded, just as the discussion boards are graded. And although my quizzes might be a little different in that I want you to answer the quizzes before you watch the videos, right? So this way you're reading the course materials, answering the quiz questions before you watch the videos, where in most cases, I actually answer the questions that are in the quiz. For me, this pedagogically makes more sense because it requires you to do some thinking prior to watching the video. You're forced to engage with the written materials before your professor, in this case me, gives you the answers in class or in the video. And then, so you're graded on the discussion, your responses to the discussion board questions. You're graded on the quizzes. Both of these are relatively minor percentages relative to the total grade. There will then be a final exam at the end, which is, forgetting off the top of my head, I think it's about 75%, 80% of the your total grade. And the final exam covers the full scope of the class. With that, I will turn it back to Tess and Janice, unless you have specific things you would like me to comment on now.
No, that's great, Chris. Thank you, or Professor Wold. And if anybody has any questions, feel free to keep those in your mind. I'm going to go over a little bit about some of the MSL LLM program requirements and application requirements, and then we'll take questions at the end. You're also welcome to drop them in the chat so you don't forget them, and then we'll come back to them at the end as well. But as Chris discussed, I really do think that our online learning platform is convenient, it's intuitive, it's easy to access. We use Canvas for our online learning platform. So a lot of students, especially if maybe you have done recent undergrad online or anything, are familiar with that platform, but it's pretty easy to learn as well. And then we also have access to a new student orientation that all of our students will get access to as well, so that you can become familiar with the platform before you begin classes. And just one thing that I'll mention too, with most of our classes, it's asynchronous, so you do it on your time. But there are usually weekly or maybe every other weekly assignments that are due. That's like the class discussions or the quizzes. So you have to stay on track throughout the semester. So it's kind of checkpoints throughout the semester, but you can do that at any time during that week. So some students do it in the evening, some students do it on the weekends while their kids are in school. So there's a lot of flexibility with that as well. So some of the program requirements for our MSL and LLM degrees. So LLM students are required, or US LLM and MSL students are required to complete 26 credit hours. So we do charge on a per credit tuition rate, which means that you are only paying for the credits that you are taking each semester. So again, that provides you a lot of flexibility. You can take one class and just one class every semester, work your way through the program over the course of several years. You can take more. We also have some students who maybe work in the legislature, so they take off for the spring semester when the legislature is in session, but they take classes over the summer and the fall to complete the program. So there's a lot of flexibility with when you take those 26 credits. The required courses for our MSL students and our international LLM or MSL students are required to take the Introduction to U.S. Environmental Legal Studies, which is a course that I teach. That is a kind of an introduction to U.S. legal studies. So it introduces you to how to read a case. It introduces you to some of the concepts that you will be introduced to, since these are upper division law school courses that you're going to be enrolled in. This course is really designed to help those students who maybe don't have a legal background or a U.S. background to understand more about the U.S. laws, regulations, structure of our legal field here. And then the other course is environmental law, which is a course that every student is required to take in our program. It's a basic survey of environmental law course, which will introduce you to a lot of the environmental laws that are core parts of the U.S. environmental legal system. For U.S. students, you are also required to take administrative law if you haven't taken it as a JD student. That's not a requirement for international students, but we do encourage international students to take it because administrative law is it's the core part of environmental laws and regulations from a domestic perspective. Obviously, we're talking about international environmental law, so there's a little bit less administrative law in that field, but it's still very relevant to a lot of the courses you'll be taking. LLM students are also required to take 2 semesters of emerging topics, which is taught by Dean Weiss, and that is a really great course because it is all about current happenings in environmental law. It's a great chance to explore areas of environmental law where maybe you haven't taken a course, or if it's an up-and-coming area of environmental law like plastics or something. It gives students a chance to deep dive into certain topics. All of those modules are fresh and new every semester, so it's a really good opportunity to hear from experts in the field on new happenings in environmental law. MSL and students are allowed to take emerging topics, but it's not a requirement like it is for LLM students. And some of our application requirements, if you are thinking about applying, we are currently still accepting applications for a fall 2025 start for our online program. So those applications are due by July 15th, so you have a couple weeks, but it is getting quicker, or it is coming up. And so for our LLM online, we ask that you have to be a graduate of a U.S. or international law school. So that would be a JD if you're in the U.S. or an LLB, or its equivalent if you are an international student. And we ask that you demonstrate excellent academic, legal research, and writing skills. Those are going to be core skills that are needed to be successful in our programs. We'll ask for your undergrad transcripts as well, from your law school transcripts as well. We don't need your undergrad for the LLM program. And then, the most important thing is that you need to have a genuine interest in environmental, natural resources, and energy law. That's really what we look for in our applicants, is that genuine interest to learn more about this field, and that genuine interest in this field. Just a note that you don't actually need to be a bar member in order to apply for the program. For our MSL students, or Masters in the Study of Environmental Law, you need an undergrad degree, so a BA or BS from either a U.S. or an international accredited institution. And again, that same thing where we need you to demonstrate excellent academic record and writing and research skills as well. Obviously, we recognize that MSL students might not have that legal background, which is totally fine. We get students from all different backgrounds, but those strong writing skills is an important part of that. And then also having that genuine interest in environmental, natural resources, and energy law. Again, in your personal statement, you're going to talk about what interests you in the program and how you think the program will help you in your future career goals. So I think this is really a great spot to highlight your interest in the field. For the application requirements, so we have a form for the online MSL and LLM, so make sure to complete that form, and on that form you're going to upload some of the other documents. That form just asks for basic like name, demographic, address, things like that. The statement of interest, that's where you're going to talk about your genuine interest, and maybe in your resume too, you'll have that reflected in volunteer or prior work experience. Your statement of interest is going to talk maybe a little bit about your background. It doesn't have to be super long. Usually we look for a one-page personal statement. And again, highlight how you think that this program is going to benefit your future career goals. a resume, which highlights your work, educational skills, volunteer experience, things like that as well. Just what you use to apply for jobs or work is totally fine for what we look for. And then your unofficial transcripts. So we won't ask for your official transcripts until you have been accepted and confirmed to the program. So your unofficial is completely fine for applying to the program, either your JD or your bachelor's degree. And then 2 to 3 letters of recommendation. Your letters of recommendation should really come from faculty, professors, supervisors, someone who can speak to your ability to succeed in a graduate level program, or who can speak to maybe your work ethic or your research skills or your writing skills. We know your friends and family are going to write you great letters, so we ask to kind of get somebody from a professional background to do that. So again, whether that's a volunteer supervisor, a work supervisor, or faculty member if you're a recent graduate. Your MSL applicants are also required to submit a writing sample. So this is going to be a 5 to 7 page paper that speaks to your writing ability, something you wrote in undergrad or something you wrote for work, as long as it's not confidential, is sufficient. And it doesn't have to be environmental in nature. Again, we're looking for something that maybe speaks to your ability to research a topic, come up with a strong thesis, and write a paper around that. 5 to 7 pages. And then for international students, we do require a TOEFL or an IELTS score, or other evidence of English fluency. So if your undergrad was, or your law school was taught in English, that is acceptable as well. You're also welcome to schedule a meeting with me, and I'm happy to go over any more details or specifics around your personal application too. I mentioned that July 15th is the application deadline for online students. So make sure to get everything submitted and in before then. Classes start August 11th for the intro class. So if you're an MSL or an international online student, classes will start August 11th. And then other classes like international environmental law will begin on August 25th. And then we run on the semester system. So it'll be starting at the end of August all the way through mid-December. For fall. If you are thinking about applying for federal financial aid for our US students, the free application for federal student aid, we encourage students to get that submitted as early as possible, because that can take some time to get awards back and to review your award letters and things like that as well. So you can, even if you're not admitted to the program yet, you can submit your FAFSA, you can apply for it. And then once you're admitted, our financial aid office will work with you to get your award to you as well. And I think that is everything that I wanted to cover. So if anybody has any questions, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask live if you want, for myself, Professor Wold, or Dean Weiss.
And if you also want to put any questions in the chat, we will be looking at that as well. But definitely, while you're thinking of questions, I'll toss out a few frequently asked questions that we often get that may be useful for you to know as you're determining whether either of these programs is right for you. And thank you, Chris and Tess, for thorough background and overview. Every time you talk about that class, Chris, I want to take it. So I probably just will one of these days. Just pop into your online class because it's such great stuff. So just a couple of things that may be of interest to all of you. If you want to see all of the classes that we offer in the online program, I believe Delia popped that link into the chat. So you can see all the classes that we offer online that, as we've mentioned, include ocean and coastal, international environmental, administrative law, environmental law, water law, wildlife. I won't list them all here, but there's what we think is a really well curated list of classes that we think really meet the needs of students in the regulatory pollution realm, the natural resources realm, and then the international realm. So some good choices there for classes. Of course, we offer the 2 programs in person as well. And there are additional classes that we have here on campus. So one of the other questions we get just on that point is, can I do some in-person classes and some online classes? Absolutely. If you happen to be in the Portland area and just can't commit to a full-time program, we have students who take some in-person, some online classes. Some students will come to Portland for a term to take in-person classes and then do the rest of the program online. So there's some flexibility among those choices as well. One of the questions in the chat is, are online students able to participate in any of the clinics? That is a great question. And unfortunately, no, those are now fully in person. We had the opportunity during COVID and quarantine to be remote, but those are now fully in person and on campus. However, what we do offer for our online students is externship opportunities. And we have an incredible network of environmental organizations, government entities, private sector entities across the country that really love having Lewis and Clark students work with them as externs. And so while it's not a clinic per se, we often are able to place our LLM students and our MSL students in environmental work experiences that are much like a clinic and would add really valuable experiential learning to your resume. So connect with us, Holly, for more details on that. But there are some pretty great NGOs out there, for example, that are really skilled at mentoring students. It would really quite closely mimic a clinic situation. So we do have that available. While others are thinking of questions, I'll continue with a few others to highlight. One question we get, and Tess mentioned this a bit, is to just get a sense of program timing in how it might match with what other things you have going on in your life. Tess mentioned that the degree minimums are 26 credits or 28 credits, depending on which program and whether you're an international student. And to give you a perspective, most of our online classes are 3 credits. So Chris's International Environmental class, 3 credits. The majority of the classes are 3 credits. So that, I think you can do the math maybe a little bit better to see how many credits we're talking about that you'd be accruing with each class. And then we have a couple of classes that are 2 credits. And then my emerging topics class is 1 credit in the fall, 1 credit in the spring. So there's some nice ways to mix and match the number of credits. We also allow students to begin either of these programs in the fall, the spring, or the summer. So there are 3 entry points to these programs. And we encourage folks to apply as early as they want, even if they don't plan to start until a later term, because then you'll know you'll be set in advance for admission. So fall, spring semester, or summer are all starting points. And then are obviously all 3 terms where we are offering courses in the environmental curriculum. So that's a question we get quite a lot. Another question we get is, what kind of career services support do you provide for your LLM and MSL students? And I will say that we have done quite a few of these webinars focused on career opportunities for MSLs and LLMs. We do that in concert with our Career Services Office. So we have a recording of the most recent webinar on careers and career services on our website. I think it's on YouTube, right, Tess? Yeah, exactly. So if you want more detail about return on investment, which obviously is a key question for many folks contemplating advanced degree programs like this, what types of careers our alums are doing. We have a whole separate webinar on that. But I will just flag briefly here that our Career Services Office is amazing, and they are happy to help our students with remote career service appointments. They will review your resume and your cover letters. And then Tess and I serve as more detailed advisors on environmental careers, as do all of our environmental faculty. So if you're interested in international environmental careers, Chris is a great resource to give you some thoughts on how to navigate, finding those employment opportunities. Likewise, Tess and I spend a lot of time with career advice. So don't feel like if you're an online student that you're just out there in cyberspace, not connected to the campus, because we do try very hard to make sure that our online students are getting really excellent services in terms of those kinds of things. The last thing I will mention as a frequently asked question is I want to mention that sometimes you may have a particularly busy semester and you might just want to take one class. That is totally fine. Tess mentioned the self-pacing of this whole program and the speed or lack of speed in which you might approach the program. And then in another semester, you may have more free time and want to take 2 or 3 classes. So it's up to you each semester to decide, what is the practical load that you want to carry. And Tess also mentioned that our LLM and MSL students pay by the credit. So that's another way to help with your budget. You can control the amount of tuition that you are willing to pay in any given semester due to that per credit rate. And actually, I have one final thing. I'm looking at my notes that we get a lot of questions about, and that is scholarships. And so we just want to mention that we do award scholarships to highly qualified students. So all of that information is in our application materials. If you're interested in seeking a scholarship in the form of reduced tuition, certainly that is an option as well. Tess or Chris or Delia, would you add any other frequently asked questions or points that we want to bring up?
Maybe I'll just augment your statement about us being available. I know I get a lot of my students emailing me with questions or wanting to chat, and I am, as we all are, very happy to do that.
Great, thanks, Chris. That's very important. Again, we want our online students to feel that they have access to us. So certainly we make a point of being available. Tess, anything else that we should mention before we?
No, I think we covered everything. Like Delia put our information in the chat. So if you have any more further questions or anything, feel free to reach out to us via email or reach out to the emails on this slide as well. We're always happy to meet with you one-on-one, answer any of those questions.
And we're also happy to put you in touch with alums of the program. If you want to talk to somebody who did our online LLM or did our online MSL, you absolutely should let us know if you'd like to connect with some alums. And because of the online program and students being all over the country and the world, we may even be able to find alums who are in your particular area of the country or the world, and they can maybe meet with you in person, depending on where that is. But that's another resource we're happy to make available. So great. So feel free to reach out. As we've all said, if you have any questions, we are happy to answer them. Thank you for being here in person. And for those of you listening to the recording, we really appreciate your time, and we hope to hear from you. Thank you.
all.